Well, we're going to begin this hour in Memphis, Tennessee, with more fallout from the death of Tyre Nichols.
A sixth police officer has been relieved of duty following the release of the body cam video and other videos of Nichols' traffic stop and arrest. Peaceful protests took place in cities across the country following the release of the footage. Prosecutors released the video after 5 of the officers were formally charged. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump was on CBS Mornings earlier to discuss the precedent that these charges place.
The fact that these 5 black police officers were terminated, arrested, and charged within 20 days from this tragedy is now the blueprint going forward. I mean, you can't tell us anymore that it takes 6 months or it takes a year. The police chief said it was important that the community saw swift action and that they moved swiftly to justice. And so we in our community say when white police officers kill us too, then we want to say it's important to the community also to see swift action and swift justice. This is the blueprint now going forward.
Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Omar VIllafranca, who's on the ground for us in Memphis, Tennessee. Omar, welcome. What's the latest at this hour on the investigation?
Well, from what we understand, after that video was released, one of the videos, if you watched it, showed a white police officer shooting a taser. So we asked Memphis police, has any disciplinary action been taken against that officer? And they just confirmed to us that the officer's name, Preston Hemphill, has been relieved of duty. So that's another officer that has been actually taken off of the force right now. And they were telling us this is an ongoing investigation. So as more video is reviewed, more names could pop out.
And Omar, what's the latest on the possibility of there being more further charges, perhaps for this officer? I mean, one thing is for him not to be working. Another one is to face any kind of criminal charges. What's the latest on that?
And that would be the next step, Lilia. They're trying to figure out, of course, once they remove somebody, now they're going to see if charges need to be filed. Because keep in mind, there were 2 Shelby County Sheriff deputies who were also relieved of duty. 2 Memphis Fire Department emergency technicians who were also relieved of duty, who were seen on body camera showing up there. But when we were watching, they weren't really rendering continuous aid at all to Nichols. So that's going to be an interesting thing. And let me kind of butt in here. There's been talk of race. This was 5 police officers that were black, with Nichols, who was also black. And that's been a point of contention. We talked to leaders here in Memphis in the black community who are saying that made this sting more. And let me show you some of the sound that we got with a local reverend.
It does set in our hearts that it was black on black crime. And from the police, but it doesn't matter what color the police officers are. When you are doing the kinds of things that we saw on those videos to our citizens, it's just wrong. And anyone who does that, anyone who acts in that way, should be held to the extent of the law, especially if they're police officers.
That really stresses something that has been
there from the Reverend.
Part of the conversation, that it's really not, it's about policing. And we'll have a conversation later on with Ibram X. Kendi about the role that, race plays in all of this and about police brutality.
But Omar, it does go to the question of never again and how state legislators, if they can do anything, could prevent something like this from happening again. Are there ideas popping up?
There are, and NAACP leaders in the state and here in Memphis have talked to state legislators at a press conference yesterday, and they want to have a bill named after Mr. Nichols. But part of the teeth in that bill is, if people, it's not quite stop and render aid. If you're an emergency responder and a situation like this is happening, you don't stop it, you don't report it, you also don't help, then there could be repercussions for you as well. And this is something that we saw on the body cam video. We saw Mr. Nichols leaned up against a car, and you had 5+ police officers standing around not doing anything after the beating that they had put on it.
Well, Omar VIllafranca, thank you so much for your reporting. And for more on these police practices and police brutality, joining us now is CBS News Chief National Affairs and Justice Correspondent Jeff Pegues. Jeff, it's good to see you. I know the officers involved in the death of Tyre Nichols were part of this unit called Scorpion. What more can you tell us about what the intention was? Why was this formed?
This was a specialized unit that was formed to bring down, or at least help bring down, crime in Memphis. Keep in mind, during the pandemic and as the pandemic restrictions eased, there was this problem of high crime in cities like Memphis and other cities across the country. And what had happened during the pandemic is that the court systems were shutting down or curtailing their work. Police departments weren't operating at full strength. You had a lot of retirements. You had people staying home, people getting sick, a whole combination of things. And as a result, you had crime rising. And so the response from city officials in a lot of big cities, not just Memphis, was to form units that in some cities had been disbanded because of allegations of aggressive police tactics. But in Memphis, they formed this unit. It's called the Scorpion Unit, and its goal is to crack down on especially gun crimes, but also people who tend to commit these gun crimes. In some neighborhoods, in some cities, law enforcement refer to them as trigger pullers. And so you have these specialized units who are trained to go after people like that, the repeat offenders, but also make stops, make arrests. And they were seeing some progress in terms of crime numbers in Memphis, with the numbers coming down. But then you have this issue with the Scorpion Unit, which has now been disbanded because of this one incident.
So, Jeff, what you're describing is a situation where you have a black police chief launching a unit to combat crime that's affecting a lot of black residents, all residents of Memphis, but a predominantly black city. And this is what happens. So you've got now a tragedy, but in addition, you've got the underlying crime problem that they were trying to address still there. So I'm curious, how are residents dealing with what is now kind of a dual problem? You've got the Tyre Nichols outcome, the mourning, the protest, and then you've got the underlying issue of, well, if this didn't work, what will?
That's a good question. I don't know if we can conclude that kind of unit didn't work. Yes, it's been disbanded, and yes, it's under a lot of scrutiny right now because of those officers' actions. But I don't know if there's anyone in law enforcement saying today that kind of unit doesn't work. The issue is how that kind of unit works. Yeah. And even the chief of police told me over the weekend that, she raised the issue of there not being enough commanders, not being enough supervisors. And that's something you hear quite often after incidents like this. People talk about the training. People talk about, why wasn't a commander present to get that under control? So I think people, based on what they're seeing in this video, are reacting quickly to what they're seeing, and that's natural. But as law enforcement moves forward, I think there will be this examination, mostly of the tactics used here. I think no matter who you talk to, whether you talk to current police officers or former police officers, that is unusual, what you're seeing there. Yeah. Yes, arrests arrests are tough to watch, but that was, I think, by all definitions, excessive force. The question is, how do you get these units operating properly? Because they are needed in neighborhoods across the country.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is for them to do the job that they were formed for, but another thing is, over-policing. It's potentially, terrorizing a community by excessive use of force, and without the death of Tyre Nichols, without these videos, how do we learn about the tactics that are being used?
Yeah. Jeff, thank you very much. Layered and complex stuff, and we'll keep covering it. Much appreciated.